Out at sea, a fisherman named Jack came across an unusual sight, a solitary, abandoned building emerging from the ocean's surface. Its presence in such a remote location piqued his curiosity, prompting him to venture closer. Compelled by a mix of intrigue and caution, Jack decided to explore the building, unaware of the historical significance of what he was about to uncover. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. He was actually on his way back to shore at that moment, back to his hotel. And Jack knew that the wisest decision was to just stick to that course. But this building was just drawing him in somehow. Maybe this building was private property or something. The last thing Jack could use right now was to be arrested for trespassing. He already had trouble enough in the States. He did not need any more in France. He had wanted to go under the radar here as much as possible, posing as a simple fisherman on a one-man boat. But getting into the building would prove more difficult than Jack had initially expected. When his little boat had made it to the side of the building, which was much larger up close than he had expected from a distance, Jack saw that the first row of window openings was actually quite high up. He could maybe climb the walls, but they were made really slippery by all the algae that had been growing on them for what could be decades. He also needed to find the best window opening to use. Most of them had bars in front of them, but Jack quickly spotted one that was busted up enough for him to probably be able to climb through. But how was he going to reach it? What he had on the boat was a lot of fishing nets, and all those had a very strong rope keeping the edges together. And so he cut them from one of those nets and tied a large metal hook to the side of it. Then he started to just throw the hook in the direction of the window over and over again. It was anything but easy to aim on an ever-moving boat. But Jack was not going to give up. After about half an hour of trying and Jack completely burning his arms out, he finally managed to hook something in the window and the rope was secured. It was completely dark by now, as there were no lights illuminating the fort, and the shore was very far away still. Jack had to take a bit of a break to rest and then started his climb into the darkness. When he finally made his way into the building, it was even darker than he had anticipated. He used the flashlight on his phone to check around the room, and he quickly noticed that every movement swept up a layer of dust. There were a lot of big things covered with old tarp. When Jack pulled it off, he saw a lot of old cannons. Suddenly, he started to better understand what this building was used for. It was most likely a fort of some sort used to defend the coastline from enemies. But these cannons were not the only strange thing Jack was going to find in this building. He had sworn that he was going to leave his thieving ways behind, but this was an opportunity that was simply too good to pass up. Jack started to go around the room. There had to be a way out of here. He started going past the walls and quickly noticed that not everything was as structurally sound as it was when it was built. Some bricks had gotten a bit loose, and with a few firm hits, they actually managed to break loose. This was Jack's way out of here. He started meticulously taking stones out of the walls until there was a hole in the wall big enough for Jack to crawl through. He knew that by doing this, he was potentially only causing more problems for himself. Jack squeezed his body through the hole and then quickly made his way to the door. His heart was pounding as if this door could give him access to the rest of the fort. He slowly opened the door to see if there was anybody or anything there waiting for him. But all he saw was the center of the fort, almost like a big arena. Jack's eyes widened. The room was a surreal fusion of past and present. Ancient helmets scattered near sleek, unfamiliar gadgets humming in the dim light. The contrast was jarring. How could such different eras exist side by side in this forgotten place? The air reeked of salt and metal. Jack moved cautiously among the relics, each step stirring up dust. It felt like walking through a time capsule. He touched a rusted cannon and fragments of brittle paper. His imagination filled in the gaps, battle cries, commands, forgotten lives. Then he found something stranger, a digital device amid the antique weaponry. He examined it closely, confused. What was this place? Every object hinted at a story, though fragmented and cryptic. The dust itself seemed to whisper secrets from the shadows. As the light faded, Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting into eerie shapes. Jack felt like he'd stepped outside of time. Then something in a far corner caught his flashlight. An object, out of place, unnerving, made his breath hitch. Its presence made everything else more confusing. The air around him grew heavy, his instincts conflicted. Should he report this or keep going? He stood frozen, weighing curiosity against responsibility. The silent fort offered no answers, only a chilling stillness. With a deep breath, Jack made his choice. Despite the allure of further exploration, he couldn't ignore the magnitude of his discovery. He pulled out his phone, heart-heavy, reporting it wasn't a brave act, it was an obligation. In the dim glow, his fingers trembled as he dialed. The ringing echoed through the empty corridors, amplifying his isolation. When he finally spoke, his voice felt alien in the cavernous space. The walls swallowed his words, making him feel even smaller. He waited, each second dragging. The fort around him seemed to pause, as if listening with him for the response. But when the call ended, doubt surged. He replayed the conversation, and with it came anxiety. Would he be seen as a trespasser? Would they arrest him? What had once felt like a thrilling discovery now felt like a grave mistake. Fear settled in. He imagined police, questions, even jail. The fort wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a trap. His pulse raced. He had to get out. Without another thought, Jack bolted. Through the halls, past the relics, every noise amplified his panic. He reached his boat, jumped in, and pushed off with frantic urgency. As the fort disappeared into darkness behind him, a flood of mixed emotions overcame him. Relief, guilt, dread. The sea was calm, but his thoughts weren't. What had he uncovered? What would happen now? Alone now, Jack found no comfort in the sea's embrace. The isolation amplified his thoughts, turning the boat into a drifting confessional. Sleep evaded him. Jack lay awake under the stars, mind adrift in a storm of doubt and fear. The boat rocked gently, but his thoughts were anything but calm. Back on shore, the authorities took his cryptic phone call seriously. French police quickly mobilized, coordinating a search based on the scant details he'd given. Maps were drawn, teams deployed, and boats launched under a blanket of urgency. Police vessels fanned out across the coast, searchlights slicing the waves as radio chatter buzzed in the background. Eyes scanned the dark waters, tracing every ripple for signs of Jack's escape. Investigators traced his call, mapped likely escape paths, and triangulated possible coordinates. Eventually, Jack's luck ran dry. Days of careful sailing couldn't outpace a fleet with a mission. Police boats closed in, their lights cutting through the morning mist. Jack stood at the helm, cornered. With nowhere left to run, he cut the engine and raised his hands in surrender. Surrounded by flashing lights and uniformed officers, Jack watched as they boarded. There was no fight left in him. In custody, the reality of his actions came crashing down. He was charged with trespassing and damage. He tried to explain, but his words faltered. His motives, once noble in his mind, sounded foolish in the sterile light of legal proceedings. What had started with curiosity had ended in confinement. In the interrogation room, the air was heavy. Jack sat alone, facing the silent judgment of those determined to understand his choices. Every word mattered now. Every answer would shape what came next. And in that room, under the glare of the law, the line between right and wrong blurred. As Jack recounted his story, the reality of his predicament became increasingly clear. With each detail he revealed, he could sense the gravity of his situation. Jack found himself in an uphill battle to prove his innocence. The evidence against him was mounting, each piece painting a picture that seemed to incriminate him further. In the stark reality of the police station, Jack was confronted with the formal charges against him. The legal terms, trespassing, property damage, echoed in his mind, each word a stark reminder of the severity of his situation. As Jack listened to the legal complexities, his frustration grew. The situation was more intricate than he had ever imagined, each legal point adding to a web of complications. He felt trapped, caught in a maze of legalities that he barely understood. The more he heard, the more entangled he felt. his initial sense of adventure now replaced by a gnawing realization of the trouble he was in. Alone in his cell, the reality of his situation sunk in. The four walls around him were a stark contrast to the open sea and the freedom he had enjoyed. As the days passed, Jack braced himself for the legal process to unfold. During the interrogation, an officer casually mentioned the name Fort Boyard, a phrase that sparked Jack's curiosity. He learned that the fort was not only a historical monument, but also a site for entertainment shows. This revelation was unexpected, illuminating the fort in a completely different light. As Jack absorbed this information, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The mix of ancient artifacts and modern equipment he had stumbled upon suddenly made sense. The fort's dual nature as a historical site and a modern entertainment venue clarified the incongruities he had observed. This understanding, while enlightening, also compounded his sense of bewilderment about the entire ordeal. The realization that Fort Boyard was a setting for television shows added a surreal twist to Jack's adventure. He recalled the strange and seemingly out-of-place items he had discovered, now understanding they were likely props and set pieces. The fort, a stage for television dramas and adventures, had unwittingly included him in its latest episode. As Jack learned more about Fort Boyard's role in entertainment, he began to understand the breadth of its use as a television set. The presence of the tigers was a startling example of the lengths to which the show's producers went to create drama and intrigue. This reflection brought a sobering perspective to his journey, making him more aware of the unforeseen hazards that can lurk in the pursuit of adventure. Despite the legal ramifications he now faced, Jack couldn't help but acknowledge the uniqueness of his experience at Fort Boyard. His story, filled with mystery, discovery, and unexpected twists, was something extraordinary. The blend of historical exploration and inadvertent involvement in a modern-day television production was a tale few could claim. Jack's adventure, though fraught with challenges, had indeed become a remarkable narrative in its own right.